Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. Expecting Dave Snell shortly, and Kelly Steinecke will be here. She's a little tied up at this point, so want to invite you to chat. Chat's wide open. We depend on chat to bring us relevancy. Hi, Dave. How you doing? We're
Good, good.
we're,
My
we're
apologies.
right at the beginning, so you didn't miss anything.
Yeah,
And I know Kelly's running a little bit behind, but hopefully we'll catch up. The word of the day is collaborate. And like I mentioned, chat's wide open. So happy to have you today, Dave. What's new and exciting in your world? And what are your first thoughts on collaboration?
well, first, my apologies for technical issues. Maybe it's time for a new computer. I don't know. Just having trouble getting in today. I don't know what the problem was. Anyway, nothing really major new here. Just life keeps going on, and business is business. So, but my first thoughts on collaboration are my first thought that came to mind was if you can't follow, you can't lead, and vice versa.
Mm,
Okay, so if you can't work together, you can't take direction or provide input or find a medium somewhere in between where you want to be and where they want to be, you'll never collaborate. You'll never get forward in the process of wherever it is you want to go. So you have to have some level of control of your own ego, some level of control of, hey, I don't know everything either. Some level of balance there to say, okay, what I don't know and what I do know, somewhere there's a difference, and I need your help to move forward together.
yeah, I think that's a great way to start the conversation. Anytime you look at a word that starts with CO, it relates to joining together. And I think you make a great point, Dave, is that most situations, almost all situations, you don't have as much knowledge or experience to cover the gambit. So you may be strong in 4 out of 5 areas, but it's that fifth area that makes you look a little bit more weaker, if that's a way of approaching it. And including people. In some ways, you can look at it like being unselfishly selfish or selfishly unselfish, is you're actually contributing so you can receive the missing piece and in turn provide maybe the 80% that can add to somebody's 20, or maybe it's 50-50, and by joining together the music sounds better and is not solely dependent on oneself. So anytime you have a team, every time you have a partner, you can always switch off. You can always support instead of lead, or lead instead of support. And it really gets to know yourself better by how people project back to you based on your performance. Because without feedback, you're really just sitting there lost in the jungle somewhere. And you're usually doing it in front of or for people, which will ultimately project that way too. Carrie's here, has his first joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Um, Makes sense, especially in our day and age with AI and wondering what is and what isn't. Dennis just joined the conversation. Agree teamwork still works. And, to me, again, you have to be a little bit more open and generous when you invite people in and when you accept invitations to come in. And some people are just not very social, not very sharing oriented. A lot of people keep score, which is like you owe me, and until you pay me, you're not getting anything. And it's always putting the cart before the horse because you're limiting opportunities as well as deferring or delaying opportunities. Because if it has to be right before you can even start, how is it going to be right after you start? And how do you begin again? And I think that's so important, to choose your right teams, choose your partners, see what they believe in, see how they translate what they believe in into action. Kind words without supportive actions are really just empty words in time. And I think that's important. And, again, it's perspective, long term versus short term. Jason Gerardo always says, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with a team.
Right.
And I think there's one other element that's important is celebration of victory. If you do everything yourself and you win and you're the only person in that room after the fact, how gratifying is it? How supportive is it? Because it's almost empty. And at the same time, if you're with a team and even teammates who end up winning the gold medal, you can enjoy that because you knew you had some participation that might have made the difference. And a little bit goes a long way if it's continued. So with that said, what have you found to be important collaborations that you've had in your career?
Well, my first thought, honestly, is I want to point out that the first thing we have to do in order to collaborate is reduce our ability. I've mentioned ego, but part of that also is not being prejudicial. We can't assume that somebody doesn't know enough or can't provide a piece of the pie or the puzzle that we need to put together. And making assumptions about people's skill and ability just on little tidbits that we hear. We have to get to know somebody. Collaboration requires an ability to, quote unquote, I hate the word network for this, but socialize and get to know somebody at a deeper level. Just knowing somebody an inch deep on a resume, for example, and saying, oh, well, that person's not going to be able to work with me just because I know what they have on 2 pieces of paper. But if I have a conversation and I don't just try to drill them on key questions that I say I have to ask for an interview, for example, if I get to know them and understand, for example, in your question is what examples do I have for collaboration? The biggest, easiest answer is our collaboration group.
Mm-hmm.
It's been very helpful for me outside of doing these types of shows, but just in a business sense and business thinking, it's allowed me to approach problems differently and to get new ways of thinking and ideas that I've had and coalescing them into action. So because I didn't know something, someone else knew something, I've never met them before, didn't prejudge them, and hey, look, I've got a new business plan idea from Carl. Okay, well, I will tailor that to my own. But had I not socialized, had I not networked, that would never come together. So there's different pieces, and I'm trying to get this through to a couple of young gentlemen right now who are going into the workforce for the first time. Get out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
People around you will know. It's very timely that we're having this word today. Get to know people outside of your one little social group or your 2 little social groups, because the world, there's 6 billion people in this world. Just knowing 5 or 10 people doesn't do you any good. You're missing out on so much more in the world.
Yeah, you make so many good points, Dave, because when you're saying what you're saying, it reflects what I have experienced too. Is there's so many things that if I would have started out the way I thought, the way I believed, it wouldn't have taken me to where I needed to be and where I should have been without some insight, feedback, understanding through time. There is no magic bullet. No one's going to say one word or a sentence that's going to change your world. But over time, you start feeling the impact and you start seeing the rightfulness in what they're saying, which doesn't make yours wrong. It just makes something better. There was that saying, and I don't know how true it is, but a rocket ship is off course 95% of the time. And it's the gyroscope that keeps bringing it back to where it needs to be. Without that gyroscope, you're going to be in some place, or, it's not as dependable either, because there's days you're stronger, other days you're not as strong. Those are the days you can lean on somebody, let them take the load, and then give them a break. And that's why driving cross country by yourself is almost impossible.
Safely.
Yeah, or comfortably at least.
Yeah.
Versus having a drive mate just for company, just for conversation, just to say, hey, I'm a little fatigued. Why don't you take over? It's time to take a couple winks here and get some rest. And it's enjoyable, right? Because now you have a little conversation. Again, it's depending on who you're with. Sometimes being alone is a pleasure compared to a complainer or someone who's always unhappy. I remember my son went to UNLV and I drive him to school every year and then drive him home every year. And, it was always an interesting drive because he had his music, and everybody, it was kind of funny in that you split up responsibilities that are so small.
Yeah.
What Walmart do you stop in to get the seeds and the chips and whatever you need for the road? When do you have some rest stops? And it's nice to be with people who aren't always under the gun, who don't feel like every minute has to be purposeful, where you can have a little fun and you can take the whole journey after the fact and make a decision on it. Because how you go into something with whoever it is a lot to do with how you're going to come through it. And I think to your point, if you're prejudicial, if you're judging the book by the cover, and you also not only judge something, you discount what could be there because you don't look for it. You don't even think it is there. Sometimes when it pops up, you discount it again. And then I think at the end of the day, what kind of person are you? What kind of person do you want to be? Can you afford to give and not worry about when you're going to get back? Can you afford to give more than you're getting and be happy with that? Because what difference does it make? I mean, too many people are majoring in the minors. They're so busy keeping score, they lose track of how to play the game. You get all these grievances and challenges afterwards versus having situations where that other person made it all happen. There was a situation, maybe the car broke down. Well, maybe they've got special mechanical skills you wouldn't have had, or they've got experience to tell you, hey, it's not as bad as it looks. We'll get through it. And I think just a reassurance of collaboration, saying you're okay, I'm okay, we're going to make it okay, let's do it. And I think it's that spirit of just jumping in with somebody and having fun. Not everything is a reward. Let me see. Dennis comes back with agree putting the cart before the horse is just horsing around. Here's another one from Dennis. Agree. Don't assume, because assume still means making an ass of you and me. And I've heard that many times, and it still is true. Here's Kerry saying about his drive. I wish I had that on my last drive when I drove home in 2010. I drove New Year's Eve 2009, drove myself from South Carolina to Texas and did it in 12 hours. The challenge with that, without getting into driving, is boredom.
Yeah.
And when you're by yourself, you have so little things to work with outside of yourself as opposed to somebody you're with. We've got Omar here today. If you don't know Omar, you should. He's a great guy. He's actually, I believe, having Carl on his show this Sunday. I marked it on my calendar. Good morning, the best morning show on LinkedIn. Oh, that's very nice of you. I'll give you another plug. Omar's a great guy. He's going to have Carl on this Sunday. I've got it on my calendar. Hang in there. We will be doing that singing show soon. Yeah, Omar invited me to be a judge on a LinkedIn singing show.
Nice.
Which I was so happy to be judge and not singer, because when Omar sent me the message, well, we're going to do a singing show, I'd like to know. And I thought, oh, no, I'm not going to sing. Even though anytime you do something and you look like you're having fun with it, you're successful at it.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to be Pavarotti, forget about it. It's never going to happen. And the people you're singing with are not professionals. And if nothing else, one good thing about being the worst singer is it makes everybody look better. So, you're adding to their fame and fortune, if not to your own. So thank you, Omar. Great guy. I've gotten to know him over time. And I think collaboration is so much more valuable over time.
Yeah.
You know, the first time you get up the bat and you strike out doesn't mean you're a bad hitter, it just means you had one bad at bat. And you learn from other people. You know, if you're on a team and even you're the worst performer, and that's usually where you are at the beginning, you'll start to pick up tips. Not only that, people on the team will start providing you tips. You know, so sometimes you have the question without the answer. Sometimes you don't even have the question or the answer. And I think that's where transparency, trust comes in, not worrying about how people see you, but how you are. And because transparency, being authentic goes a long way. I'd rather be with an honest, transparent person than some flashy guy or gal who's just putting on the airs to kind of make themselves something. And there is that whole strategy, fake it till you make it. Everything is relatively true to a certain point. And again, it has to fit your personality, your kind of lifestyle. And if it's aligned, at least you're not competing with an existing situation. You're just adding and complementing to something. Omar comes back with also, I will be doing a top 10 most inspiring people of my 40 years. Will include you coming up in November. Well, thank you, Omar. Always a pleasure to be in your company, be on your show. And, you know, the other benefit of collaboration is you never know because, you know, Carl's in our cohort group. Eventually, everybody who follows this show, supports me, supports the people with me. And that goes back to them as they get on the show. So, in other words, anytime, and this really applies to collaboration, you merge two circles, each circle gets bigger for the merge without changing itself, but adding another self. And I think people, especially on social media with LinkedIn, don't understand the power of leverage. One person against a billion is pretty significant. 10 people who are connected to 10 people can get 100 people working together against one large body. And you're going to really minimize everybody else is doing it themselves by themselves because they don't know what could be, because they don't trust themselves to trust someone. And without trust, you have nothing in a team. You know, if you doubt the people you're with, if you question their ability, you know, you're going to minimize the opportunity. You might be safe, but it's safe where you want to play in life because life won't change for you, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to be dangerous, but you know, there's nothing that doesn't help with a little bit of fear
The
because a
risk.
little, right? Because it'll humble you. If you think you're overconfident, I got it covered, you're open to some sort of hit because you weren't focused anymore on what could happen. And I think how you project is how you model to other people around you, especially on a show like this, because, you know, over 2.5 years, 3 years of 900 shows, I have picked up some of Dave and some of Carl and some of Omar, and I appreciate it. You know, may not know exactly what piece it is, could be a saying like I just mentioned about Jason. So it also saves you from having to do all the homework and all the heavy lifting. You say, hey, that's a better way of saying it than I did. I'll accept that, and I appreciate it. Dennis comes back with agree, have fun, not just doing something, but sing something and enjoy. Well, there's, you know, it's hard to be unhappy when you're singing. You know, singing about unhappiness, but if you can break out in a song, whether it's in a shower or when you're walking by yourself in a park or even when you're among people, it takes things to a different level and it shows you can escape yourself for a while. And sometimes that's all you need is a break. Sometimes you get fatigued, it gets tedious, and that's when people give up permanently. But if someone say, listen, it's time for you to take a rest, I'll cover you for a while, come back when you're ready, you've got second chances as opposed to this is too much, this is too fast, I'm not good enough, and you come up with all these reasons to quit. And that saying, winners never quit and quitters never win. We've got Gabe here today. Haven't seen you in a while, Gabe. Welcome. Great to be here. I suggest everybody who's on the show, watching the show, why don't you just leave a comment on where you're from? It'd be great to be recognized. I know a lot of people tell me I watch your show all the time and I've never seen their name or who they are. And it could help both of us. And it really lends itself to that collaborative spirit that we're talking about. So, Dave, being in the military for as long as you have, I know that's a team effort. I know running a ship is not a one-person responsibility. What did you gain from that experience?
Funny you bring that up, because I was just having that conversation with my son yesterday about the things that I learned of getting out of the 5-person network, if you will, and to learn about other people, and no two experiences are the same. Culturally, in the military, we had just this plethora of people from Africa, from Europe, from America, South America, Asia, just every culture you could think of. Even on a 200-person ship, you had a melting pot of people. So you understand different cultural perspectives better by getting out of your bubble. I know the Europeans, rag on the Americans because we never travel enough. Now there's a difference. Our whole country is the size of Europe, so we can travel across country and be in, essentially a different country in comparison, culturally at least. In the military, we find that we have to learn from other people's perspectives, the way that they are approaching problems differently. And that's collaboration. That's understanding, taking my ego out of it, being able to understand and respect other perspectives and say, look, I need a little bit of a fire controlman. I need a little bit of an engineer. I need a little bit of this bosun mate who's going to keep the ship primed and painted and rust free, and a guy who can steer the ship, and we're all going to get together. And there's always this argument in the Navy of, well, the ship doesn't mean anything without the engineers because you can't go anywhere. Then you've got the combat systems guys who say, well, without me, this ship is just a floating tub of metal because we're a weapons system now. So, but you have to have both.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have an engineering guy go around and drive the ship, what's the purpose? Just to drive around? When I put a weapons system on it, without the engineers, I can't do anything here. Now it becomes a U.S. Navy warship because we've collaborated together and said, I need you to keep the engineering plant going, and I need you to protect the ship so I can keep the engineering plant going and do the mission that we've been assigned. So there's very much a team effort in all of that. I like to go back to two things that you said earlier, and a lot to unpack in all of this. Your team effort, whether you're on a team of one, and I'm going back to the Olympics in my mind here, to the 100-yard dash, 400-meter, whatever it was. This lady and her husband's a Paralympian. Well, how many people who on the single race, and the team races, the whole team can come and hug together and say, okay, we won together. But the single individual participants, they don't just stand up and go, okay, thanks. She ran straight to her husband and he ran right to her in the Olympic, when they both won, because no single person won that race. Yeah, he put in all the effort, or she did, in the 10 seconds that it took to get set and finish across the tape. But we always forget about the hundreds and hundreds of hours that go into the effort, the family support, the meal preppers, the coaching, the psychologist to get you in the right mindset. So there's so much more that goes in than had they not collaborated before those 10 seconds. I know it's not just 10 seconds, it's less or more depending on the race, then we wouldn't have seen that success. They had to be able to respect and let go of their ego and their prejudices and their perspectives to say, You know something I don't, let me learn from you so I can be the best I can be. So there's all kinds of collaboration there. And then the second point is you were talking, there's a point with collaboration where we have to let go. I keep going back to the ego and the prejudices, but we've got to stop taking ourselves too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Be ready to ask for help. Be ready to acknowledge that we don't know everything. And the thing that popped in my head, ironically, was MASH. And Dr. Sidney Friedman, he had a line throughout the series whenever he'd come in, and it was just, hey, look, take my advice, people. Don't take yourself too seriously. Drop your pants and slide on the ice. And that was just such a little tidbit in that show that says, look, things are going to work out. We're in MASH is a prime example of your question about a ship. There are different personalities and teams and different cultural and personal aspects that made it work, but they never took themselves too seriously overall. And if we can just get over ourselves and these extreme left-right limits of ourselves, I have to be this, or I failed at that, if I didn't accomplish this, let it go. Drop your pants and slide on the ice. Okay, I'd rather not be in a place where I could, because I don't like cold that much. But I think it's a very important aspect to collaboration of letting go. Okay, don't worry about what happened 6 months ago, keeping score of what, and I struggle with this from time to time too, of keeping record in my mind of, well, you did this 5 months ago, or I never vented on this over the last 3 weeks. Let me do it now. And when you don't have that ability to just let go and see the future and the mission you want to get to, in the end, you can't collaborate. You can't work together. You lose something if you can't let it go.
Yeah, those are terrific points. I hope everybody's taking notes. And I always found that having some fun breaks up the seriousness, shows people you don't have to be 110% serious all the time, and not understand that life is a journey. There are no outcomes. Everything is a continuum. And you never know what you don't know. You never know what the next day is going to bring. And being optimistic, being hopeful, having a positive attitude, even if you don't feel it, it's important to the people around you. And that's why leadership is only for the very few who know how to take advantage of it and how to take responsibility and accountability for it. Because if you're at a higher level, it should demonstrate that you have skills or some experience that the people below you don't. How do you leverage those skills and experience for their good versus people who have a leadership position and says, I worked so hard to get here, now you're going to work hard for me because of that. And that models future behavior, because people end up doing things that they were taught to do when they first started by the people around them. So if you're with a kind, generous person, you'll probably be more kind and generous yourself.
I'll go back, if I may, real quick, Don, to your question about the Navy. That's a very, very poignant point, because I just had this conversation again about an old CO I had who he drove us. I had one guy who was in hospital because he just burned out within a couple of months. He just couldn't keep up with the captain's driving demeanor. And a couple of us ended up leaving the ship as well for other reasons. But what happened was the senior commander, the commander above the CO I'm talking about, took us all in. He's like, look, yeah, there's a problem. This CO, he's bad. And yet, we're not going to do anything about it. We're not going to remove him from command. He's only got a month left. Let's just let him ride it out. Well, the problem with that is, to your point, very poignantly, is, well, A, you haven't solved the problem. All you've done is transferred it to somebody else. And guess what happened? 5 years later, about 5 years later, almost exactly, that CO got another ship and ran it aground. And I went to a couple of buddies in the surface force, because I had left the surface fleet at this point. And I said, hey, can you tell me what happened with the investigation? He goes, Dave, I can't tell you. I said, look, I just want to know, was the command climate issue that drove them aground, or was it a technical issue, with the charts or the GPS or whatever it was? They said, no, 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 no. That CEO drove people. They were afraid to say anything bad because they were going to get yelled at. And I said, wow, geez, here we go. 5 years ago, we should have canned this guy. And here he is. He passed that on. You don't solve anything by passing on your problem to somebody else or a later date, or at least giving them a bad mark and saying, look, this is a problem. You need to work on it, and we need to be observant of it over the next however long you're still in this company or in this command or in this Navy, whatever it is. I had the fortune of, just 2 years ago of going on that ship that he ran aground, and people were still talking about, oh yeah, this was the one that ran aground 13 years ago. So to your point, you've got to recognize where the bad seeds are at times, so that you can look and go, okay, look, I know you have something positive, but you're being very negative, and I cannot be around that.
Yeah, and that speaks so loudly to having the courage to do something that may not be in your best interest, but is in the future best interest of so many more people like you. And that's where the sacrifice comes in.
Yeah.
It's no sacrifice when it's comfortable, when it's easy, when it's just who you are. It's when you got to be something you're really not, something you may not really want to do, but know if you don't do it, you're probably going to leave a bigger mess or maybe a bigger challenge. With that, I want to recognize Linda Coleman. Linda has been a great supporter since the show began. Always admire Linda. Linda says, morning, Donald and all. Great to come in today. And funny how day I come to listen to about taking a break I had when couldn't keep on. Then grandma duties took over. And singing brings much joy to start a day trip and back with my friends. Yeah, time disappears when you're singing, when you're laughing, when you're telling jokes. Those are the times when you don't get overly tired, you don't get fatigued. And sometimes just taking that moment will give you a little bit of freshness to keep you going for the next element of your journey. Harvey's here. Harvey's here even when Harvey isn't here because of his influence and his quality of modeling. Harvey's one of the hardest workers on LinkedIn. He's so supportive of others. He has a Sunday column that just is dedicated to helping people look for work and supporting those people. He's got his Tuesday franchise show. He's got his Thursday franchise brand show. He's an important, valuable component of our cohort team that meets every other Thursday. Can't wait to get back together with Harvey next Thursday on the group call, and look forward to being with Harvey and doing many more things going forward, because we've got a loose collaboration that lends itself to further collaborations and changes. So nothing we do is set in stone. Everything is fluid. Everything, my philosophy is whatever is best goes next. Doesn't matter who authored it, where it came from. We're just looking to do better, be better, and to help other people do the same. And that's how you can build large organizations and great companies. Dennis comes back with, I'm still capable on vacation on Cape Cod, Mass. I have to give you credit, Dennis, for getting away, going to a beautiful place like Cape Cod, and can hear you well in real estate, real East Coast time. Visiting my twin sister, and I'm from the Mile High City of Denver, Colorado. I know that, and great to have you in the same city that I'm living in also. With that, it just reminds me of how people can be aware. My grandson turned 12 the other day, had a party last night. And what was interesting is I said, what's new? And he says, I think I really helped save somebody today. And I said, well, how'd that happen? He says, well, I recognize a girl who's in the class and she's been bullied and intimidated and having a really hard time. And she mentioned something to me. And I decided, hey, why don't we take a little walk? And I talked to her and I heard a lot of what she was feeling. And she was looking like she was going to give up.
Hmm.
And I said, you should, he tried to support her and says, you need to really talk to someone. You need to express this to someone, whoever it is. And it made a difference. And it was just being aware, being sensitive. So many people get signals from people that they don't hear or they don't interpret. And I know, you've been involved with a lot of people who are dealing with transition issues, mental health issues. And, you feel awful when you know you could have done something if you would have truly known about it, or if you would have taken the time to really find out about it. And
Yeah.
and that's the tragedy, is not only what you can build, but what you can avoid happening that's negative. So there's a positive inclination to teamwork, but it's also a positive inclination to lifting somebody up who can't get up on their own anymore, or is just giving up. And whether you give up on major things or small things, most people, they get exasperated, and if you're with someone who's always bringing you down, taking you down, telling you how bad you are and how many ways you should be better, even if you don't believe it, eventually it's like chipping away. And then you say, I can't deal with this. Okay, you win. I won't do it. And then the next thing happens. And all of a sudden you're giving up yourself to someone who you have to wonder, why are you saying something that has to be interpreted as being a negative? Why
Yeah.
would you tell me something that if I told you something, you wouldn't respond to it? And I think that's when association and disassociation comes in. There's a point when you say, this is normal, if that there's anything like that, and this is fair. But now this is totally unfair and unnormal, and it's driving me crazy, or it's bringing me down. And especially if you're in a position where you're responsible for the income of the family, the happiness of the family. If someone's out there doing what they need to do to make it happen for everybody, everybody should make it better for that person. They should be in their corner when they get home and say, hey, take a break. I'll get dinner on the table. And you know what that means so much to someone who has had a hard day, and allows them to transition. Or I can see you're not feeling that well. Why don't you take a break, take a walk, come back? Who's on your side and who isn't. And you can't fight two battles at the same time. I've known so many people who can't make it at work because they can't make it at home. And they can't make it at home because they take their work home with them. And pretty soon it's double. Instead of alleviating the pressure, it adds to it. And it forces things that never had to be, because when you look back at life, you can find simple things that you took for granted.
Have you been reading my medical records?
No, but I think whatever it is, let me just cover Harvey and we'll get to the medical records. Wow, what an amazing story. Empathy and listening. I think I know where those qualities have come from, Don.
Yep.
Well, I know I've talked to Kelle many times, especially early on. Thank you, Harvey, for that. Is we were doing the hour of Empower back then. And it was only because it was following COVID and everybody was either depressed, had PTSD, anxiety. I mean, it just kept coming up. And we said, okay, that's what everybody wants to talk about. Everybody's dealing with. Let's do that. We got a great array of coaches and therapists, and still have some with us. But when you looked at it, it was for the common good. But by using that common good, it still allowed us to get to know each other just as well, maybe better, tighten up on a few things, but know that life isn't forever. Life shouldn't have to be taken seriously, because it's a joke in a lot of ways. It's almost a puzzle. And if you look at it like a puzzle or a game, you don't take it too personally. And that's when things go kind of the wrong way, is everything affects you and you're overly sensitive for whatever reason. And what that lends itself to is avoidance or modification. Like, I'm going to start drinking because I can't handle it. And every short-term solution works great until it becomes a long-term issue. And now you've got a problem with another problem instead of a solution. So getting back to your story about medical records, you piqued everybody's curiosity.
Well, the reason I say it is because you have hit on exactly what happened to me in 2002. That CEO, the same CEO I just mentioned before, he chipped away at my confidence level and my ability to believe I could be a productive member of the command. He just chipped away. Oh, you're not doing this right. You're doing this wrong. You have to do this. And there's more to this story I won't get into here right now, but it chipped away at my confidence. It chipped away at my ability to do my job. Other department heads were trying to mess up to deflect from Dave's, the captain beating on Dave. I'm like, okay, well, if that's not working, then he must really have something against me, or I'm really that bad. And it drove me to, the first of my, lack of a better word, mental health crises in my time in the Navy. But it also gets to, I'll go back to the very, very beginning here when I said, leadership, you have to be able to follow to lead, and lead, you have to be able to follow, vice versa. And it gets to a very big problem that I think I see more and more and more, and I have for the last 25 years, not just in the military. My focus has been the military, obviously, but even in the corporate world, is ivory tower leadership. And that's not collaboration. That's, I'm in power and I'm in charge and you will do whatever I say. And I first saw this really in its worst case, because I've always been taught that leadership by walking around, management by walking around, get out of your desk area, go talk to people. My first ship, we had 250 some odd people on board, 260 maybe. I knew the first name and at least one other thing about every person on that ship. Whether I saw them every day in a 6-month period, I said, I'm going to know everybody on this ship. Could I tell you anything about them today? Not very many, handful or 2 handfuls. And I still see them on LinkedIn or Facebook. I'll say, oh yeah, I remember that guy, Jake. Oh yeah, that guy. But leadership is about getting to know people. It's a very personal effort that you cannot just be, like you mentioned earlier, I'm in charge, therefore we're going to do it. It's my way or the highway. So I saw this, must have been 2006, with a particular admiral. I won't say where I was, or I won't dime him out or anything, but the rumor was, not even the rumor, I'm not going to say that. It was, we had to get his approval on this from a 4-star admiral. Well, you had to go through what we called the 6 gates of hell, because if you didn't get through this first guy, you weren't getting to the next guy. And so the admiral never saw what was really going on, because he sat in his office, 3 stories up going, I'm going to do whatever I want. And he just had this emperor's clothes are great, but he really had no clothes, because he didn't know really what was going on but the good stuff. So you can't collaborate effectively if you don't get out and know people. There's a book, I haven't read it in 30 years, but In Search of Excellence, where I first learned this, Management by Walking Around. It's came out in the early 80s, I think. And I have an original copy my dad gave me, back in college, because he read it and he was in the Navy as well. And he said, Dave, if you're not getting around talking to people, then what are you doing? You're not an officer. You're not a leader. And I should caveat that last statement. A leader doesn't have to be an officer or chief petty officer or manager or director, vice president. It could be the cashier. It could be the teller. I'm just thinking money right now. I don't know why I'm going to banks, but it could be anybody, because if the branch manager doesn't know what happens at the teller level, for example, then how can they direct them or give them guidance on what to do? So you have to be able to talk to people, understand what their problems are. Maybe it's a problem with how they get the money out. They could be doing it faster, more efficiently with less errors. Or it could be a problem that they're having at home. We've mentioned home life there a little bit, and that was a driving factor for me was captain's crapping on me. I go home and my ex-wife is crapping on me. So, we have to have some compassion of what's going on in people's lives to say, okay, and I'm terrible at this. It's a growing effort every day for me. Or at least I should say with some people I'm better and worse with others. It's a growing effort. If you just say, oh, I'm great with everybody, then you're not learning, you're not growing, and you really have put your ego ahead of somebody else's thoughts and needs.
That's so important. I appreciate that so much, because what comes to mind is your distinction between people who are leaders and people who demonstrate leadership skills.
Yeah.
Right? The person who in a situation jumps in front of something and takes over. And it could have been anybody, right? If a door opens and someone needs to close it, well, you don't go to the leader and say, well, when they close it, it'll be closed. It'll be like, well, I'm going to take care of that. And over time, when you start doing leadership things, you earn people's respect as a leader. And right? And some people can go from really nowhere to everywhere fast, because everybody can talk, but not everybody can walk the walk. And there's a lot of people who depend on situations to get them where they are. It could have been, well, it's a family business. I'm the third generation. I'm going to inherit it. It could be favoritism. It could be so much more. But let me get to some of these comments. I'm going to start with Beverly first, because we're just having a little back and forth. And Beverly noted, which I noted for about 2 weeks, that you can't engage a LinkedIn Live through someone's background photo anymore. So when you think, oh, Harvey's having a show, or, Kelly's having a show, and I go to their profile, it's not there, you just think, well, the show is not there. As it turned out, it shows up when you go to someone's post. So you can go to their profile, go to their post section, you'll be able to join there. You can go to someone's events, and that'll allow you to join there. And what I've done is the first line of every post and newsletter is the link to tomorrow's or today's live stream. Why? Because if they can't find out where you're at, it doesn't matter what you're doing where you're at, because you'll be the only one there. And I think it's, again, it just shows you where collaboration comes in, because LinkedIn doesn't give you a guidebook when you enter. When they make a change that's significant, they don't alert anybody. And if this was my first or second live stream and no one could get to it, no one saw it, it may give me reason to say, well, why bother, as opposed to knowing there's a new change or a nuance. And I'm sure if you knew there was an issue, you would probably find an answer, but sometimes you don't even know. And then you start thinking it's technology, it's you, it's Restream, it's your whatever. So thank you. Beverly said, excellent. We can disassociate what goes on in your personal and professional life. They impact. Yeah, we can't disassociate. They impact each other. So true, Beverly. And Beverly is just a wonderful resource for insights into people and how they can become more successful. And it's understanding what you're working with. You would never lift up 500 pounds of weight if you were just a beginner. You would take it slow. You would get comfortable with it and build with it. And I think that's what leadership is. There's not one action you take that makes you a leader forever, makes you a leader for the day or for the initiative. How do you come back and show more leadership on areas? And leadership is really encouragement, motivation, inspiration, showing praise to other people, making them feel valuable, because the things that take people down, the opposite takes them up. And I think once you understand that, is how do I fuel this machine that I put together, these 20 people? Well, some people respond to different things different ways. Some people need directness and they need discipline, and other people have too much directness and discipline and they need to level off a little bit. They need to get a little bit less tight. So, getting back to Dennis, okay, so here we go. I had quite a few comments. Dennis comes back with, agree we have to learn from not only our own mistakes, but from others too, because we won't live long enough to make them all ourselves. And, mistakes, again, that's always how you, a matter of semantics. I always found failure is feedback. Everything has a lesson to be learned if you look for it. And sometimes you can't be that thin skinned. You just got to be able to roll with the punches, go with the flow. And sometimes you'll surprise yourself because in time, you stick with it long enough, you'll find the real reason, not the reason you assumed, because that's typically the reason. And it makes you be a little more patient, reserve judgment, because you can't unring a bell. Once you go off on somebody or something, it's in the books. You may be able to apologize, but why even have to go through that action to apologize when you could have avoided it, or actually make them part of the team and say, what did you mean by that? Or that is not in character with you. Something is different. And maybe they know it, maybe they don't. And maybe they'll say, listen, I just got into a very bad situation. I'm being sued by somebody or something else, and I carried it forward. And I know if you're with a partner or a spouse, a lot of times they're bringing home where they just came from. And you just happen to be the first person they're going to be dealing with it. And once you recognize that, you say, okay, I know where this is coming from. I'm not going to really engage it. I'm not going to make it worse by throwing more fuel on the fire. And some people wait for those opportunities. One of those gotcha moments. I've been waiting for this forever because you've been hitting me on this, and all of a sudden you just went out and threw all this money away on something. You know what I mean? I can go on and on, but I won't. Linda comes back with all great words. I know my daughter working from home for a big company has issues where people in charge of a product not getting things done and a time limit coming. She goes in and digs her heels in and helps accomplish much and not getting much recognition. Let me see. Okay. A little bit long. Okay. And a guy who has around for almost the year, I still show as a lead. Dennis says, agree we need to talk, but need to listen more to learn from others' mistakes because we won't live long enough to make them ourselves. We need to listen more, and that is why we have 2 ears and only one mouth. Carrie says hello to Beverly. Harvey comes back. Great points on the live stream. Looking forward to leaving and sharing on our next meeting. I have to go to prep for my show now. Thank you to both of you. Well, thank you, Harvey. Harvey's always gracious, very generous, very thoughtful. And no matter how successful Harvey gets, he'll still be the same Harvey we all know and love. So thank you, Harvey. And, I think what it demonstrates with the word collaboration is opportunity, right? And there's so many opportunities by not doing the traditional thing all the time, is to personalize it, individualize it, and also understand the framework. If someone's always been great, 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 they deserve an off day. And you deserve to allow them that. A lot of times you say, well, I'm going to take a vacation, and people are, oh, good for you. You deserve it. But none of those people will tell you to. Right? I mean, those people, as long as you're there and you're doing your thing, great. But why doesn't someone, and I used to do that, is, something different. Like, hey, take you and your wife to Vegas for 3 days on us. Have a good time, or go to Yosemite for 4 or 5 days. Why? You're working here a whole year. Why not do something that isn't in your contract? Why not offer you something that's voluntary instead of understood? And I think that says, hey, words are good, but you'll move with me and you'll move for me. And that makes a difference, because if you're just legalese, talking to lawyers, going to paragraph 3, sentence 2, and identifying, well, this isn't the way it is. It's like, well, you're not talking to a book, you're talking to me.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to you, and it goes both ways. And I think there's a point where you just say, I can't make this any better. I can illustrate it, I can argue it, I can even win an argument, but will I lose the war in time? And then how you treat people in front of people is so important. I've always followed that thought that criticize in private, and support people in public. And the last thing you want to do is embarrass somebody in front of people they know and love. I used to have my son on baseball teams, and they don't all, coaches are hard to find. So you can fog a mirror, you could typically be a coach in Little League. And they would just start screaming, usually at their own kid. And I'd be so embarrassed, and that kid would feel so awful. And I'm thinking, well, this is the coach. This is the leader of the team. This is their own son, And I saw so many really promising athletes quit because their parents it was never good enough.
Yeah.
It was, you should have done better. And it goes with scholastics too. You're smarter than this. You're better than this. And now this is what you come up with. And I'm thinking back to the parents, well, you're not smarter and you're not better for being that way. And, it's easier to be on the side. You don't know all the things. But, kids at a certain age are there to have fun. If you're in the major leagues and you're getting $20 million a year, yeah, you deserve being demanded certain things for that effort. But when people are just having fun, and the other thing is maybe someone played an instrument for the first time and didn't do so well. They're never going to play that instrument again if you get on them. But if you say, hey, thanks for just joining the band, picking up an instrument, blowing some air through it or whatever, and people will stick with it that way and understand that it's not seriously enough to take it that seriously, but to have fun with it. And then eventually, by doing it, they start to see value, and then they take over themselves, and they don't need that. Okay, we got a person who loves my hat. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And, that's a sign of collaboration, because even a compliment adds to the team. You may not even be a player, but if you come up to somebody in the park and say, hey, I see you here all the time, thank you for joining our park, or something silly like that, all of a sudden you think, yeah, I'm important. Someone noticed. And there's so many people who don't notice, people who pass people by in the hall that they work with and look the other way, and what does that tell you? Well, they're not very friendly. And what does it tell me? I don't want to be friends with someone who's not friendly. And pretty soon you start that whole cycle of everybody's looking out for themselves. And that's in an honest community. There's backstabbers. There's people who spend their whole time scheming on how to get over you, or put you in a bit worse position to make themselves a better position. And I think that's where qualifying makes so much difference. There's so many wolves in sheep's clothing out there, and that take advantage of the people who don't look far enough or deep enough or question enough. And you have to be your own source of protection and your own source of opportunity, in the circle of friends or comrades or cohorts that you hang out with will accomplish that. So we're up to 59 minutes, Dave. It's so funny. When I started doing hours, no one could believe it. Like, how could you do a show for an hour? I can only do 30 minutes. I'm thinking, well, it's because your show doesn't lend itself more than yourself, as opposed to shining the light on so many others. So now that we're almost at the end, what are your thoughts on collaboration and the show?
Well, I have loved, I think we're at a year now since my first show with you. I think it was this week or next week. It was a year ago. And I look forward to them. It became once every other week. And now it seems like, when we have the few of us who need help, collaborating to help you fill, time and slots. And had I not been able to come in today and Kelly has something else, then it would have been just you. So it's a really good way to collaborate and to learn from each other. I love this show. I mean, I look forward to anytime I come on.
Well,
I'm sorry.
No, please continue.
No, I was just going to say, I'll go back to the very beginning and say, look, to collaborate, we have to let go of ego and prejudices and learn from everybody else to say, look, I don't know everything. You know something I don't know. Maybe we're on the same path, but you had a different experience that helped you get a different perspective than I did. In the Navy, we have different ships, so we have different commanders, so we have different perspectives, but we're on the same path, but we have different views. So we have to be able to learn from other people to collaborate. And I'll finish with, I think what's been mentioned several times is, having fun. Okay, in the military, we work hard and we play hard. We used to play a lot harder than we do now because we had a lot of other, external abilities of port calls and drinking and whatever for better or for worse. But we definitely knew how to work hard, and we definitely knew how to play harder than we worked sometimes. And I'll finish with Dr. Sidney Freeman again. Just, pull down your pants and slide on the ice. Have some fun. Do something different.
Well, that's a gem, and it's something I'll continue to remember. And you see, that's a contribution. One last thing I'd like to say is you don't have to be friends with everyone, but you should be friendly with everyone. Yeah. And there's a difference, because even at work, you don't want to create friendships because it will get in the way of having to do your job sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, I'm responsible for this. A lot of people will tell you up front who they are. I'll just recall a story when I was in college and I was taking some advanced psychology classes, and it was a group which was really a challenging group. And the professor would have people over his house every week and everybody get drunk. And it just happened to be the assistant chief of police there was in the class trying to get a higher degree. And he told everybody, I just want to tell everybody up front who I am, so you already know is, if you bring anything besides alcohol here, you're going to put me in an uncomfortable position. And everybody appreciated that, as opposed to, they just got arrested, or something like that. Anyways, transparency, authenticity, showing some love and kindness that's mostly unnatural for people goes a long way. And just asking somebody, what can I do to help you? And follow their direction versus giving your own direction. And I agree with Dave. These shows are the highlight of my week because I look at everybody as teammates, family members, and everybody can see everybody growing, changing for the better. Last comment from Linda is great closing words, guys. Remember to bless someone with your ability to help, and blessings will come back to you. And from Linda, I think that's truth. Then Efalabi, sorry if I haven't pronounced it probably, you can be friendly with everyone, but you don't have to be friends with everyone. And why not? Give it the best you can, but don't go beyond it, because then you're going to have to deal with unwinding something that never had to be portrayed. And little things over time compound. And I think at the end of the day with collaboration, are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you comfortable? Then you're winning. Yeah. If people say, well, I didn't make enough last week, well, that was last week. And maybe that's all you'll ever make, but why would you take something away from something good because something wasn't good enough in itself? And I know we can go in circles. But with that said, come back Monday. We're going to have a great show. Con is going to be here with Carl. I always try to use pretty much the same people, different combinations, different ways. I love having three just in case only there's two. And I've never had a show where I did one by myself, except maybe the first few couple years ago. And my goal in that case would be to invite anybody in the audience onto the show. So there'll always be someone, but at the same time, I look at Kelle 19, 20 months every Thursday. When you know somebody well enough, everything is right.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. It's not how many you know, it's the ones you know that really are trustworthy. And with that said, we're a little bit over. Thank you, Dave. Look forward to seeing you next week on next Wednesday.
Yep.
And probably Thursday on our cohort meeting. The rest of you come on Monday and we'll have a